the U.S. in different contexts. Could be from Puerto Rico, could be from, although of course that's part of the United States, but to continental U.S., could be from Dominican Republic, Mexico, Central America. And so when my students read this literature, they learn about immigrants' experiences, and they learn what life is like as an immigrant. So that's another important way for them to be able to imagine an experience that's so different from their own. So I put a lot of emphasis on that. Okay? And so literature, as I was saying, teaches us about different people's different cultures. So do you guys think, I'm going to give some examples, and you can give me a thumbs up in the camera. Here, I'm working with two cameras. So you can give me a thumbs up in the camera if you think it does, okay? So do you think that our food is part of our culture? Yeah? What we eat. Yeah, it's part of our culture. Okay. What about where we live? Is that part of our culture? Yeah? Okay. What about the sports that we play or activities that we do? Yeah? Because here I put baseball. If I were talking about Mexico, what sport would I put? Soccer, right? Yeah, I can see some of you mouthing it. Soccer, right? So it's part of our culture. Okay. What about our flag? Other symbols? Yeah, that's part of it. Okay. What about how we speak? Yeah, definitely. So obviously, right now I'm speaking in English. I spoke to you briefly in Spanish. That's part of how we speak. And you guys may not hear it, but I have a Southern accent because I'm from the Southern United States. So I can turn it on a little bit more. I can say, "Hey y'all, how are y'all doing today?" And I speak that way with more accent because I was raised in the southern part of the United States. Versus if I were more in the north, I might say, "Hello, how are you today?" I can't do it very well because I'm not from the north, right? It changes how we speak. So I'll just take a couple more minutes. I wanted to share with you a poem that's about how we speak. So this is a young poet. She's in her 30s. She's from New York, but her parents were from Puerto Rico. Okay, and so they came to New York before she was born. And she has this poem about how her mother, who's from Puerto Rico and grew up speaking Spanish, how she speaks English. That she speaks it with an accent. It influences the way she speaks English. Okay? So I'm going to read the poem, and I've put pictures over here to help with some of the vocabulary, just in case some of it's new for you. Okay, so we've got underlined word, and then we've got the picture over here to help. Okay? So, my mom holds her accent like a shotgun with two good hands. Her tongue, all brass knuckled, slipping in between her lips. Her lips are all laughter and wind clap. She speaks a sancocho of Spanish and English, pushing up and against one another in rapid fire. See, there's no telling my mama to be quiet. My mama don't know quiet. Her voice is one size better fit all, and you best not tell her to hush. She waited too many years for her voice to arrive, to be told it needed housekeeping. She doesn't want people to restrict the way that she speaks. Why isn't the way that she speaks good enough, right? See, English sits in her mouth remixed, so strawberry becomes a strawberry, and cookie becomes a cookie, and kitchen, keychain, and chicken all sound the same. My mother doesn't say yes, she says, aha, and suddenly the sky in her mouth becomes a Hector Lavoe song. Her tongue can't lay itself down flat enough for the English language. It's got too much hip, too much bone, too much conga, too much cuatro, two-step, got too many piano keys in between her teeth. It's got too much clave, too much hand clap. It's got too much salsa to sit still. So you see, she compares her voice to music to express how beautiful it is. It's being an anxious child wanting to make Play-Doh out of concrete. English be too neat for her kind of wonderful. Her words spill in conversation between women whose hands are all they got. Sometimes our hands are all we got. So you've got this sense of solidarity, of companionship between women. And accents that remind us that we are still bomba, still plena. Say huepa, huepa, and a stranger becomes your hermano. Say dale, dale, and a crowd becomes a family reunion. My mother's tongue is a telegram from her mother, decorated with the coquis of el campo. So even when her lips can barely stretch themselves around English, her accent is a stubborn compass, always pointing her towards home. Isn't it beautiful, the poem? And she uses these examples that are so specific to Puerto Rican culture, right? With the coquis, the different musical references. So she's reinforcing these connections. So she's telling us we need to be proud of who we are. There's no need to try to change. Even if we don't speak English perfectly, we should still be proud of what we can do. And I tell my students the same thing. I don't speak Spanish perfectly because I learned it as an adult. I still make mistakes sometimes, but I'm able to communicate and express my ideas. And I tell my students that so they know if they make mistakes, it's okay, as long as you're continuing to learn, right? And then we also have this idea that our lifestyle, the things we value, the way that we speak, the choices that we make to speak English, to speak Spanish, the vocabulary that we use are what keep us connected to our home and our culture. And that's really valuable, okay, to maintain those connections. So this poem is really cool because Denise Frohman grew up in New York, but she's able to analyze the value of her mother's language to connect with her culture and her history and her family's history. And so she's bringing that to light in this poem. So that's just one tiny example, but I'm happy to answer your questions, to talk, anything that you want to talk about. I'm happy to do it. Thank you for listening. Stop.
Thank you, Adrienne. So touching. I like it very much. Okay. So Miss Sandra is a miss who is teaching English too. So she's going to say something. Miss Sandra, are your students ready?
Yes, of course. Okay, so nice to meet you, Adrienne. So, based on community services, I believe these actions are important experience because you have people, and probably that actions makes you happy, right? And of course, one day I will serve the community. On the other hand, my students would like us, answering you something.
Okay.
Omar, please, can you start, Omar?
Yes, teacher. I think the community service is very interesting. I have one question. Can you tell us some funny moment helping people in the community service?
Okay, so a funny moment. So I think the funniest moments always happened because I did community service when I was in college, and I was still learning Spanish. And I think the funniest moments always happened when I did not understand what someone was telling me when they were trying to tell me something in Spanish, and I had no idea what they were telling because I was still learning Spanish at the time. And so I've had some funny mishaps of not knowing what someone wanted and giving them something completely different. So maybe they asked for I'm trying to think of a good example. maybe they asked about a casa. Querían información sobre una casa, and I thought that they were saying that they wanted information about my taza. You know, so you can use words that are simpler and total mistakes of what the person needs. So those are always the funniest moments.
Can you give me a taza of?
yeah, exactly. So good question.
Okay, second question, Miss Sandra.
Yes, Asael, please, your turn.
Yes. Which community service do you think that is the most important to do? Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Asael. So there's lots of things that are important to me. Something that I've been working on recently, though, that is really special is I'm part of an organization, local in Boone, and we do a lot of work to support the immigrant population. So we try to support the immigrant population here, and everybody, I know you guys in Mexico too, we're all affected by COVID. You know, there are a lot of people, coronavirus. There are a lot of people who are losing their jobs. There are a lot of people who can't send their children to school because school is closed. And so something we've done recently is that we have been collecting money to give to families who have lost their jobs so that they don't, so that they can still pay their rent. And we've been teaching families that may not know how to use all of the technology, you know, what we're using here today, the video conferencing system. Some of the parents don't know how to use those. So we've been teaching parents how to use them so they can help their students, their children, go to school, even though they have to do it digitally. And so that's something, it's been really important for me right now because I only moved to Boone a year and a half ago. And so it's been great to see that to see how the community responds to the need of people within our local community and how we can really do something tangible to help people even during this time of crisis that no one would have expected. So that's something special recently.
Okay, thank you. And I have another question. Talking about immigration, yes. What do you think about immigrants that are turning back to their country?
Okay. People who decide to, for example, so maybe they came from Guatemala to the United States and they choose to go back to Guatemala. Is that what you mean? Yeah. As long, if it's their choice, if it's what they wanted to do because they wanted to only be in the United States for a set amount of time while they were earning money to build a house or to support their family, and they're ready to go back to their country because they want to be in their hometown and be around their family, I think that's excellent. You know, I'm always happy to see that happen. I have my ex-husband is from Guatemala, and that was his experience with a lot of his family members. They returned home because they wanted to. That's excellent. When people are deported and so they're forced to return home, that's what breaks my heart. I hate that because so often that means that families are being separated because, you know, wife is here, the children are here, and the father and husband is back in Mexico or, you know, Chile or wherever. And so that is really devastating and difficult. And so that's actually something that I talk about a lot in my classes is in my medical Spanish class, I teach my students how can they help their clients create a plan for if they're deported so that their children are supported. so that they can maintain contact with their children. There's somebody who will take care of their children, that type of thing. While as in my literature classes, I use different poems and texts to teach my students about the emotional experiences of separation and what that might look like, how people explain their own experiences of sadness, of trauma, of challenge. Yeah. Good questions.
We'll be waiting to President Biden change a lot of that bills from Trump presidency.
Yeah,
So
and I don't know if you guys saw, I just saw this morning that he's already changed one law, because we have the census here in the United States to count the entire population, and President Trump had made a law that undocumented immigrants, people without legal paperwork, would not be counted as part of our population. But it's really important that these people are counted, because that way the federal government knows where to put resources in different spots. You know, it's a big difference of if you say 10,000 people live in this city, they don't need a lot of resources, versus if you recognize 30,000 people live in this city, they do need more resources. And so he's already made that change, which is, it's a small step, but it's still good.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Miss Sandra?
Yes, please. One more, maybe Norma. Norma, are you here?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi. I like people. What do you like?
I couldn't hear the very end. Why do...
Norma, can you
repeat, please? Norma?
Why do you like
Why do I like speaking Spanish, or?
What do you like community services?
Okay, why do I like community service? I'm sorry, Norma, you spoke English perfectly. It's just the volume is quiet. So, it's part of my values. I think it's important to, of any skill that we have, I think that there's a way to give back to the community. And so with language, it's natural to work with people who speak Spanish in the US and need assistance. And that's actually how not how I started speaking Spanish, but how I grew in my study of Spanish. Is I started working at an agency that was helping families who needed housing, who needed a place to live. And it makes it more meaningful, because if we just teach a language and we don't think about what we're going to do with that language, what's the point, you know? And so I think when we're teaching a language, we should think, how can we make our world a better place with that skill? How can we enable our students to connect with the community and do better things because they know that language? And the same goes for anything that you learn, right? We learn history so that we can understand why things were bad in the past, what we can do differently. We learn math so that we can learn how to think differently, and we can make better financial decisions, for example. So everything has a larger purpose. And for me, the larger purpose became community service coupled with my instruction.
Okay, thank you. It's very interesting.
Thank you, Norma. Thanks for the question. Celia, I think you're muted. I don't know if you...
No, sorry. Jocelyn, can you start? Jocelyn?
Yes, I'm sorry. Okay. Hello. talking about migration, and that subject is interesting for us because here in Mexico we have a large percentage of immigrants, and most of them go to the United States. For that reason, some of my students have questions for you. And maybe, please, Gabriel Barbosa, could you ask your question?
Yes.
Turn on your camera, please. Turn on your camera, please.
Yes. Now you see here?
Yep. That's better.
That's a question that's nothing to do with the community service or immigration. That's my question. Why did you decide to study French?
Why did I decide to study French? Okay, so this is a funny story. So when you're in high school in the United States, you have to do certain classes. So you have to always take science, history, math, English. I'm sure it's very similar for you guys there. And then beyond those, those main subjects, you get to pick 2 other subjects that you're going to study. So when they asked me to pick, I knew I did not want to do chorus because I'm not a good singer. I didn't want to do art because I'm not a good artist. I didn't want to do gym because I'm not good at sports. And so I decided I'm going to take Spanish and French because those were the only 2 options left. And so I started studying them at the same time and loved it. I loved both of them. And so I started studying, and when I went to college, I said, okay, I'm going to study to be a nurse. I'm going to do nursing. But I started with, I said, but I'm going to continue Spanish and French. So I started taking my Spanish and French classes, and I never went to any nursing classes. I stayed, and so I kept doing Spanish and French. And now I only teach Spanish, but I have multiple colleagues, co-workers here at the university, and I speak French with them every day. So, yeah. Thanks, Gabriel.
I have another question.
Okay.
What is your favorite book?
What is my favorite book? I can show it to you. So this is a book that I teach in my class, and you'll be able to read it because it's in Spanish. Señales que precederán al fin del mundo. So this book is by Yuri Herrera, who's a Mexican author, and it was published pretty recently. It was published in 2009. And this is my favorite book because it talks about migration from Mexico to the United States, but it does it all with symbolism. So it never says Mexico, it never says United States. It has symbols and different representations to talk about the experiences of migration. So I think it's really fascinating, and I love to teach it because it gives my students a different perspective of things.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so please, Brenda, do you have your question? If the migrants do know English, could it be a reason for do not finding a job?
So if they don't know English, can it be more difficult for them to find a job? Yes, definitely. There are lots of places where they can find jobs where they don't need to know English. So, for example, if they work in a restaurant, if they work in the kitchen, or if they work in construction. But, for example, it's always going to be helpful to know English. So, just an example, my ex-husband worked in a restaurant, and he hadn't studied English. And he said when he started,
Bruno, necesito que te desconectes. No conectes nada, por favor.
and ask him, he would work, all day. And the manager would ask him, "Are you hungry? Do you want something to eat?" And he didn't know what they were saying. So he would always say, "No, I'm fine," even though he was actually hungry and wanted to eat. So even in those basic senses, it's always helpful to know another language so that you can express yourself to the most extent, and so you don't have to depend on other people. That's what happens a lot too. When immigrants don't know English,
Porque son
they
todos
have
los
to
de...
depend on other
Ahorita les
people
ayudo, ¿eh?
to help them instead of being able to do things on their own. And of course, it's not about intelligence, it's just about being understood. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people in the US that don't speak Spanish, even though, our population here of people who speak Spanish is growing. So there should be more emphasis on that, but there's just not. So.
Thank you so much. So we know that you speak Spanish. So we want to share your experience of one of my students. So that is in Spanish.
Okay, great.
So, please, Carla, could you tell us your experience?
Yes, Miss.
Cámara, por favor, Carla. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carla and want to share my experience. Yo tengo familia que emigró a los Estados Unidos por falta de trabajo. Mi papá emigró por necesidades de trabajo. Eso fue cuando yo tenía tan solo 2 años prácticamente. Él se fue porque él no quería que yo tuviera una vida como él la tuvo. En la escuela me hacían burla de que no tenía papá porque siempre mi mamá iba a los eventos del Día del Papá. Y a la vez es bonito porque la experiencia de que me dan cosas, prácticamente me dan las cosas que a veces yo pido, tengo juguetes, zapatos, ropa, todo lo que prácticamente uso. Y yo no conozco a mi papá, solo lo conozco por fotos y por videollamadas. Él ya va a ser 11 años desde que se fue y desde que me dejó. También tengo unos tíos que dejaron a mi primo de 1 año y 3 meses. Igual por falta de trabajo, y también mi primo solo conoce a mis tíos por fotos y por videollamadas. Y mi primo y yo tenemos la misma experiencia, nuestros papás no los conocemos y los dos crecimos casi como hermanos, y pues esa es solo mi experiencia. Gracias.
Gracias, Carla, por compartir tu experiencia. Quiero responder un poco en español, si me lo permite.
Sí.
Obvio que es un club de conversación en inglés, pero como me lo hablaste en español, me siento que toca. Gracias de verdad por compartir tu experiencia. Entiendo, aunque no lo he vivido en carne propia, entiendo lo complicado que eso puede ser. A través de mi ex marido, tengo parientes que han vivido experiencias bien similares, que mi ex esposo, su papá se vino a los Estados Unidos cuando él apenas tenía como 2 años, igual como tú lo explicaste. Entonces lo vivió similar y no conoció a su papá hasta que tuviera 19 años. Lo mismo con un primo suyo, que su papá se vino antes de que él naciera y luego no lo conoció porque él sí era indocumentado. Su papá no lo conoció hasta que él mismo llegó a los Estados Unidos cuando tenía 21 años. Y lo que puedo decir, según lo que he vivido con ellos, de mis parientes, que es una experiencia de verdad triste de ambos lados, pero es parte de lo que me apasiona por enseñar sobre la migración, porque acá hay estereotipos que la gente dice que los migrantes vienen a robarnos los trabajos, que están aquí haciendo parranda, haciendo berrinches, ¿verdad? Causando problemas y todo eso, por puro racismo, ¿verdad? Que no se toma en cuenta la necesidad que existe en el país de uno, no se dan cuenta de la tristeza que hay con tener que dejar a un niño para poder sacar adelante a la familia. Entonces, por eso es que creo que es tan importante que desde que los alumnos empiezan a estudiar español, aunque sea en la escuela secundaria o lo que sea, que aprenden sobre las realidades de la migración, que aprenden sobre los lados menos publicados, pero mucho más difíciles, ¿verdad? Y que es bien importante que se entienda eso para que haya una perspectiva más amplia y yo diría más correcta de la cosa y que nos podamos como sociedad acercarnos a la situación con empatía en lugar de juzgamiento. Entonces, gracias de verdad por compartir eso y lo aprecio.
Gracias.
Thank you. If we can have time,
I don't know. Maybe we don't have time. So I start with my students. Jocelyn?
yes.
Okay, but if you want to give Emilio the opportunity to ask the question, that's okay. Okay?
Yes, that's for Emilio. Please, Emilio, could you ask?
Okay, Miss.
Turn on your camera, please.
No way. I have heard that some American people don't like Americans in their country. It doesn't matter if they have permission or not to be there. What do you think about that?
No, thank you, Emilio, for that question. That's definitely true, and it's something that we've seen even more since President Trump was elected. Is that his manner of speaking kind of enabled more racism to be publicized. And so people who before were more quiet about their feelings became more vocal. And I think that a lot of it is based in fear. There's a lot of insecurity that if a white person can't find a job and is having trouble with work, he doesn't want to think about the larger issues that could cause that. It's easier, even if it's wrong, to blame it on immigrants and say it's their fault that I don't have a job. And so I think a lot of it comes from that fear of competition, and also because of a fear of people who are different and say, they don't speak English, I can't understand them, I don't know what they're going to say. And all of that is based in ignorance and not trying to understand, not trying to understand someone else's experience, that type of thing. But unfortunately, when we have a president who speaks very negatively about immigrants, people feel, okay, well, the president said it, so I must be right, you know? And so that's allowed a lot of this discrimination to grow, which is really unfortunate. And, hopefully, with a new president, we'll begin to shift that to be able to see things more accurately and more fairly.
Yeah, people is waiting for the best. I mean, Democrat.
Me too.
Yes, I am.
I was happy all day yesterday. I said,
yes, I was watching that. I was watching the news, and all the people were happy. all of them are laughing, and I think they have a better look for it.
Yeah. There's a feeling of relief.
Yes. Okay. So now we are going to start another kind of questions. Mayrin, could you start, or Alexander Flores, or Ortega, or Pedro, please? Could you?
Yes. Hi, my name is Mayrin, and I have read that Gabriela Mistral won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1935. I also believe that she has been the only woman in the region to achieve it. What is your opinion about this relevant character for Latin American literature?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Nadine. So that's something that we've seen in a lot of different formats. Also in different awards for literature that were given in Spain, it's always been men until very recently. And it's really rare to give these awards to women, which is really unfortunate. Now, I do a lot of work with Mexican literature, and in the last several years, maybe since around, it started around 1970, but especially since the 2000s, there are a lot more women who are able to get their work published. And do you guys know Elena Poniatowska? Writer? So, hang on, let me see. So, I have this book, and this book is about las soldaderas de la Revolución Mexicana. So it's written by a Mexican woman author, and it's talking about how there were these perspectives of the women who participated in the revolution, that they weren't really important. And she wrote to correct that, to talk about the important role that they had. And so there's more of a conscious effort now for women to be able to write, and for to talk about the experiences of women in the past. And so I'm hoping, and now, of course, in the US, it's different, but we have our first woman vice president. And so I'm hoping things will slowly continue to change, although it's really unfortunate that there's still that discrimination.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Irene.
Hello, my name is Alexander Javier Ortega Gomez, and I already know you like poetry, and I want to know why you like poetry. Poetry.
Okay, so I'll tell you a secret, Alexander. Thank you for your question. I usually don't like poetry. I usually prefer novels or short stories, because for me, a lot of poetry, when you read it, it's hard to understand at first, and you have to think about it more. It doesn't describe as much. But when you look at some of the poems that are being written now by really young poets, they are using a language that emphasizes their passion. And so I didn't show you the video because it's hard to transmit a video over the internet, but on a video call. But if you look at this poem that I shared with you guys today, and I can put the title in the chat, she actually performs this poetry not as a book, but she performs it out loud in front of a crowd. And you can see the passion that she puts into it. And so that's the type of poetry that I like, where you can see the author presenting it and how much they care about the subject, and that they really want to make a difference with their words. It's more like music. So that's my secret. I don't really like much poetry. Certain poetry that's published now, that you can see the passion.
Yeah. I thought you liked the poetry, but okay, we made a mistake. Alex, but if you want to share with us your experience on painting, Alexander, okay, that's your chance. If you want to share with us.
Yes.
We can wait, Alexander. Don't worry. Okay, we can start with.
Sí.
Are you ready?
Un
Are you
segundo,
ready?
por favor.
Don't worry. Okay, Alexander Flores or Dana Paola, Sergio, Pedro, please go ahead.
Su mamá le grita en plena conferencia.
Pedro.
Yes, teacher.
Okay, please go ahead.
What another career had you chosen if you hadn't studied literature?
Okay. Yeah, thank you for your question, Pedro. So I'll answer. When you're going to be a professor of literature in the United States, you have to get your undergraduate degree, which is 4 years, and then you do your master's degree, which is 2 years, and then you do your PhD, your doctorate, which is 5 years. Okay? So I did the first 6 years, and then I nearly left after my master's. I nearly did not continue because I wanted to become a social worker, una trabajadora social. And I wanted to work directly with the community and with the immigrant population. So that's the job that I would have gotten. Instead, I decided to continue studying literature because since I study literature that's about immigration, I decided I could still work with the community and do community service with my students if I were a professor, versus if I were a social worker, I would only work with the community, but I wouldn't teach and I wouldn't work on literature. So I decided this was the way that I could do both rather than having to make a choice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I have some problems, but on this subject, on this about this topic, I like art, especially painting and drawing. It makes me very relaxing, and with that, I feel that I can show and illustrate everything I think and imagine, so that others can also look this. Thank you. This is one of my paintings from when I was
Very nice.
child.
I know you have bears. I know you have more. Okay.
Wow, that's beautiful. Look at the colors.
When I have 8 years, when I was 8 years,
And how old are you now?
Don't worry, Alexander.
15 years old.
13 years old. By the way, my
His
students.
mother is a teacher, English teacher. So she was corrected that because I love him.
My students make the same mistake. They say soy 18 años instead of tengo. That's great, Alexander. That's something that I love about teaching literature and music, is that it's a way to see people's thoughts in a format that's more tangible, and that it's a beautiful way to express your ideas. So that's great that you've been doing it for so many years and that I hope you continue.
Okay. Thank you, Adrienne. Please, Néstor, por favor, Néstor o Carlos, por favor, sus preguntas. Néstor, Carlos,